YouTube is going to get rid of all of us. The Amazing Atheist, Sargon, Shoe on Head, hell, even PewDiePie. YouTube will purge the deplorables, and who they're going to define as deplorable is anyone they don't control. You're going to see more situations like PewDiePie, where big non-political YouTubers are targeted for blacklisting based on spurious accusations. And then these big, blacklisted, formerly non-political YouTubers will be demonetized because they are now political and controversial. This is the beginning of the end for YouTube as a platform for alternative viewpoints. Either they will start removing channels whole cloth, or they'll just make it so no controversial creator can earn a living plying their craft. And ultimately, this battle has nothing to do with racism or misogyny or whatever word they're using for sinner. It's about the mainstream media retaining narrative control. If eating cheese was stigmatized, they'd call us all cheese eaters. It's just a political power play. So how do we fuck YouTube right back? Benjamin Lapine wrote the following in a comment on my video, "You won't make anything great without it." Quoting Benjamin, "Don't you guys kind of make the case for not supporting you? You're here pretty much entirely for entertainment. Society, biology, business, tradition, everything in human nature is stacked against you. You're probably not going to shift it. You only have the hope of comforting others who already agree with you. That's a great thing, but I don't think you'll ever be able to do more." Hell, they sniped Milo. He was the perfect storm of everything the establishment loved, and they sacrificed him because he wouldn't toe the line. You poor girls would be butchered if you took a heavier role. My husband really likes plants. Bear with me for a moment, Benjamin, while I tell you this story. It relates, I promise. My husband really loves plants. Specifically, he loves fruiting trees and bushes. Our yard has blackberry, blueberry, raspberry, 6 varieties of sour cherry, and his prize hybrid apple tree. That tree had 5 varieties of apples grafted onto a hardy root system. One year in summer, he noticed some of the leaves of his apple tree were going brown and falling off. He tried to figure out what was going on and discovered that some bit of local wildlife was gnawing on the bark of his prize apple tree. Over the course of the next month, he watched in horror as several of the grafted apple varieties withered and died under the onslaught of that nighttime vandal's teeth. His prize tree was dying. One day, after hearing weeks of him lamenting the slow death of his tree, I saw him out in the yard with a pair of pruning shears. I watched him cut away the dead branches, which made perfect sense. And then he started to cut a good portion of the live ones off, too. Thinking he'd finally decided to kill the tree out of frustration, I ran out and said, "What the hell are you doing? You're going to kill it." He didn't stop his pruning. He just said, "I'm forcing growth into the roots." For 3 years, that little midnight tree violator did its level best to kill my husband's prize apple tree, and for 3 years, my husband fought back by pruning the dead away and forcing the growth into the roots, as well as attempting to erect various barriers with varying degrees of success. Absolutely none, in fact, until one spring, that tree came to a tipping point. In that year, the year the tree was big and strong enough, its root system wide and deep enough, it shot up a foot and produced 4 buckets worth of apples. My husband was never able to stop that little devil from chewing the bark off his prize apple tree, but by forcing growth into the roots over and over and over again, he forced his tree to grow stronger and more resilient until the damage caused by the furry fiend went from potentially lethal to a minor nuisance. So let's tie this all together. How does my husband's love of trees relate to Benjamin's comment? And how does all that relate to fucking YouTube? Well, first, let me ask my usual challenging, uncomfortable, prickly question that originally prompted Benjamin's response. If you're currently not supporting Honey Badger Radio, and you do think our content can make a positive change, why don't you support it? Give a hard, long think about the answer. And if you decide you want to start, go to www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. Now, let me get on with it. Milo was sniped because his platform was built, at least on part, on groups that toe the narrative line. Honey Badger Radio has had attempts to associate us with pedophilia. We've endured accusations of misogyny, handmaidenism, con artistry, rape apologism. We've been shot at repeatedly by the mainstream media, even before Milo really hit it big. We got kicked out of a convention and smeared as fraudsters and harassers. There are publishers in the arts field that won't do business with us because of that smear campaign, because, and I quote, they won't do business with liars. But at the end of the day, so what? We're still here. We're still trucking. When I looked at the landscape of the cultural war, I saw a lot of points of failure for people like me. Choke points, traps. I ran through a lot of worst case scenarios. Media blackout, Patreon kicking creators, government indifference, academic lockout. Years ago, I actually ran through the scenario of waking up one morning and finding HBR gone on YouTube. Channel gone poof. To be fair, some points of failure still ended up blindsiding me, and if you're listening to this and you think there's a blind spot I'm not considering, tell me. I want to know. But systematically, I went through and determined what was left after I removed reliance on all those points of failure. There is one path left to us, one system they have not completely locked down. That's the path I'm pursuing. Benjamin Lapine said, "You poor girls would be butchered if you took a heftier role." You're right, Benjamin. You're exactly right. If we took a heftier role, we would be butchered. That's why we're not doing it. Now, where I disagree with you, Benjamin, is in your implication that this only applies to us. It applies to everyone. In particular, it applies to people who've pursued disproportionate audience growth over focusing on establishing an economic base of people who are ready to roll up their sleeves and invest time, money, and effort. Focusing solely on growth and audience, with all those potential choke points I mentioned before, is a recipe for disaster. It is a sequoia growing on sand. Every institution, group, or platform that's still seeped in the narrative in which an accusation is conviction, like we saw with Milo, will pull its support for you just the right moment to send you crashing down. We're seeing it with Milo. We're seeing it with PewDiePie. Every content creator is going to follow. It isn't about money, it's about control. YouTube will slit its own throat to drown us all in the blood. There is going to be a day when we wake up, log into YouTube, and find out that our accounts are wiped clean. Even if you don't rely on advertising, if you passively rely on your large audience to funnel money to you, even if that money comes through Kickstarter or GoFundMe or Patreon, you are still relying on YouTube to let you keep that audience to passively draw from. For a long time, and most certainly after Calgary Expo, I knew what needs to be done, what needs to happen first, is to create an economic base divorced from the narrative, an economic base of people who do not throw someone out on accusation alone, an economic base of people who support the right to disagree. That's the most difficult base to create because people only support those they agree with. But that's the only base that matters when it's disagreement itself that's under attack. To get that base, you have to force growth into the roots. I approach YouTube as a means to an end rather than an end in and of itself, and I always have. It's nice to see the subs go up, don't get me wrong, but what really matters is the community that we build outside of YouTube, the economic base that we develop, the volunteer pool that we've established. Every $5 thrown our way with an email attached, every letter sent, every volunteer invested, every single one of those things builds our roots, builds that base. If we have that, we can rebound from any calamity. If we sink our roots deep, we won't topple and we won't starve. And to be quite frank, this situation with YouTube should have been obvious for anyone years ago. It's pointless to build something that can be toppled over or taken away by people who do not like you. It's madness to rely on their forbearance for support. Eventually, they will run out of patience, and the easy YouTube money and attention will dry up. And if there is no economic support for the freedom to question, no economic base, people who will not throw others under the bus based on an accusation alone and no more, no place where people are allowed to disagree, then you have to build it. On almost every fundraising video, there's a commentator who warns us we're punching way above our weight, doing things even larger YouTube channels wouldn't attempt. I've even had some say that we should wait till we have a larger audience to attempt any sort of fundraising projects. And yet, we do manage to pull it off. I believe it's because our greatest growth is and always has been in our roots. A strong root system is an economic base that allows us to question, to move, to grow, to pursue controversial topics. An economic base that doesn't throw people under the bus based on an accusation. YouTube can take your leaves, but it can't take your roots. And it can't take your leaves either, if you've been regularly pruning them back. Men's rights is challenging material. It hits an intersection of shame for both men and women. The shame for men is recognition of their vulnerabilities, and for women, it's recognition that they can be wrong. Very wrong. Nobody wants to see that shit. Of all of the disagreeable things, men's rights is the most disagreeable. So it takes a special breed to stick around and tough it out. Add to that me repeatedly challenging people to invest, to look to themselves for the solution, and we have a volatile cocktail of do not want. Most people want to hear their own opinions said back to them at a slightly different pitch. And they don't want to hear that they need to take action to make change. They want to hear that the solution is everyone else taking action. To agree with them. We might be small, but we're mighty. We're mighty because we attract tough, obstinate, independent thinkers who are willing to see solutions in terms of them taking actions. And we challenge them to be even tougher. If in the process of pruning I lose 10 people who are just here for entertainment and gain one that's here to make a difference, then I'm sorry to see that 10 go. But you cannot force growth into the roots without pruning. And despite my pruning, here you are. Here. Every time I challenge you to ask, why aren't you invested? I get another 10 people who say, but you're making your audience feel bad for putting all that pressure on them, saying it's down to them. But it is. It is down to you. All of you listening to me now, it's come down to you. Where else do you think the solution is going to come from? But from people who are at least tough enough to ask the questions that need asking and face the answers no one else can. And if I hit a nerve and 10 flee, but you're the 11th who toughs it out and gets tougher. It doesn't matter how battered you are, how destitute, how wounded. You are the only ones who can do anything. You have been deputized by your grit. You are the 300 at Thermopylae, the last of the last lines of defense. Benjamin said, don't you guys kind of make the case for not supporting you? You're here pretty much solely for entertainment. Society, biology, business, tradition, everything in human nature is stacked against you. You're probably not going to shift it. Not everybody can shift it, Benjamin, but that doesn't mean nobody can. The solution, inevitably, inexorably, inescapably, is to face the worst ouchie of all, the shameful part of ourselves we don't want to see. That's what's driving the shit show, folks. The only people who are going to get through this are the ones who can face that metaphorical executioner's bullet without flinching. And the only ones who are going to make a difference are those who face that metaphorical executioner's bullet and realize it's down to me. So yeah, if you aren't a supporter, ask yourself why. Give it a real good think. If your answer is that you think we're full of shit, fine, makes sense you don't support us. Can't argue with that. But if you don't think we're full of shit, if you do think we can make a difference, you might just find that the answer to the question why you don't support us is, I don't think I can make a difference. But you do. In fact, you're the only one who can. But enough about that. Enough about that psychological woo. Let's get down to brass tacks. I implied I'd offer a way to fuck YouTube, and I better make good on that. When I saw the videos and article on YouTube's new move to censor because some of their advertisers don't like to be featured next to extremist content, like anti-feminism and men's rights activism, I realized I would not tolerate this kind of behavior from an erstwhile supporter or a patron for an instant. This kind of behave or else I yank your funding blackmail. I think we all know how I've reacted to that in the past. I'd tell them to shove their wad of cash and take a hike. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to demonetize all HBR videos. I don't want to rely on a funding stream that isn't reliable, and I don't want to build on sand. As far as I'm concerned, YouTube is a tool, not a support system. However, because some of our supporters are broke, and the only way they support us is through watching the ads, I'm going to create a new playlist called Fuck YouTube Censorship, comprised entirely of videos of flushing YouTube's logo down the toilet. If you want to contribute a video, please use toilet paper and send it to badgerpod at topic@badgerpod.com. I'll monetize every single one of those videos, and if you're someone who supports us through watching ads, feel free to let that playlist just auto-run through all of its videos. Put it on when you're about to sleep or go out for lunch. YouTube forces us to put a link to a video or playlist if we want to use end screens, so I'm going to take great pleasure in always linking to that Fuck YouTube Censorship playlist at the end of each video. If you want to give YouTube another big fuck you and help ensure HBR's economic independence from big box ideologues, then go to www.feedthebadger.com. We have a current fundraiser running, and interestingly enough, it's to send Brian and Jonathan to San Jose to investigate a new social media platform. YouTube isn't going to be replaced by YouTube clones, whose only selling feature is not being censorial. It's going to be replaced by a new platform with an entirely new way of presenting content, and an entirely new type of content to present. To explain, I'll use Maddox as an example. During Web 1.0, Maddox was huge. He got millions of hits a month to his website, but his written content didn't translate well into the visual medium of YouTube, and he ended up being a rather middling YouTuber. Although not bad at 300,000, it is a step down from the best page in the internet. Just as text mediums like websites made way for visual mediums like YouTube, YouTube will in turn inevitably be replaced by a new media platform with a new entertainment product. So send Brian and Jonathan to San Jose to hunt down the entertainment platform of the future, whatever is going to turn YouTube into a mewling husk of its former self. A bit of business in the after show. Brian and Jonathan are going to host a meetup in the lobby of the San Jose Marriott on Friday the 31st of March, 7 p.m. Pacific time. More information on the fundraiser page. I'm also going to ask everyone who's currently a patron to assist in our transition from per episode to monthly on Patreon. So if you would go to Patreon and put in the total amount you would like to pledge to us as your per radio show amount and set the number of times you support us to 1, that would be greatly appreciated. www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. Please remember, I will always respect your financial support by focusing on building a sustainable and stable platform for questioning, which means if any supporter or any source of income makes their support contingent on us saying what they want to hear, I will tell them to kindly take their money elsewhere. I fight for people's right to disagree. I build on stone, not sand, and anyone who tries to force me to agree can go fuck themselves. YouTube included. Go fuck yourself, YouTube. In the preferable hole.